Good morning. How's everybody doing? All right. Well, thanks for coming out this morning. My name is Chris, as Marty said. You can find me. I'm on Instagram. It's Fire and Flower, and then eventually there'll be a website and Twitter and Facebook, all the modern technology I'm slowly learning. I'm going to speak on the mixing process. One thing with Fire and Flower that I do is all my bread is handmade, so I use no machine. I have in the past. I've worked at bakeries and then baking at home when I've used machines, but I have found that for me, I enjoy the tactile feel of the bread using my hands. Plus I know I can mix something, and if somebody blindfolded me, I can just judge how that dough is coming together by just using these. It's nothing that somebody can teach you right away. It's something that takes time, trial and error, trial and error. I've done many breads that have turned out quite poorly, but it's a great learning experience. So one thing I always tell people, with mixing, decide if you want to use a machine or by hand. Is one better than the other? No, I would say not. You can produce great bread with a machine or by your hands. But one thing that is going to help make great bread is, of course, great flour. Sunrise, of course. Anywhere you go in the country, there are going to be people who are selling, the small farms who are selling great quality heritage grain flour. That, in my opinion, is what makes a great bread. So hand, machine, like I said. Each one, it's up to you, it's your preference. I prefer by hand. It's something that I have developed over time, and it's something that I think lets you enjoy the mixing process that much more because you have 100% interest and involvement in it by using your hands. So with mixing, there's kind of three main ideas with mixing. One is, of course, just the distribution of the ingredients. If you have 3 different types of flour in your bowl, your mixing bowl, you need to all kind of incorporate those together so you don't have different types of flour or other ingredients, whether there's seeds in there, fruit, other embellishments. You want to distribute it all throughout. The next is to hydrate the flour and hydrate the ingredients. Water is your most basic, but you can use other ingredients to hydrate your flour. You can use milk, you can use juice, you can use beer, you can kind of be very creative. So you're going to hydrate that flour, then hydrate the ingredients, and then as soon as you add that water, that liquid, that is going to start forming your gluten. So distribute the ingredients, hydrate the flour and the ingredients, and start that gluten formation. There is one thing, soon as you start adding that liquid to your flour is when you can start judging your dough consistency. Is it going to be a higher hydration dough? Lower hydration dough? Another benefit I feel of using your hands is you can judge that right off the bat. Using Sunrise flour, I've been using them for probably a couple of years now. It's not always the exact same every single bag I get. It varies a little bit. I like that. It's not an exact science, but using my hands, I can tell this flour is going to react a little bit differently than, say, the previous bag of flour I had. So getting that dough consistency right off the bat, using the hands is a way to start building that foundation of making great bread. So after you mix, you've added your water, whatever your hydration is. There's a term that's out there. Some of you might be familiar with it, some of you may not. It's called AutoEase. Sometimes people say AutoEase. Pretty well it just means take a rest, take a break, let the flour. What's happening is you introduce that liquid to the flour, mix the dough. So here's kind of a very shaggy. So I mixed this, probably started about an hour ago. I let it have an AutoEase, which is just a break. So I added the flour and the water to the flour, mixed it together. I didn't add any salt at the time. I just let it sit. What that is doing, that break, that AutoEase, is allowing the flour and the proteins within the flour to hydrate. AutoEase can be a beneficial tool in the whole process, but it is not going to guarantee you, as I've seen some places, it's like, oh, if you do an AutoEase, you're going to have great bread. No, it's just a stage. It's a tool that can be used to produce good to excellent bread, because you're allowing the flour and the gluten to hydrate allowing the starch to absorb the liquid. AutoEase will decrease your overall mixing time, whether you're doing it by hand or a machine, but then it's going to increase dough extensibility. So you're going to increase how that dough can stretch. Two terms you'll hear in baking is extensibility and elasticity. Elasticity, it's a rubber band. How will it spring back? Extensibility, how far will it extend? So the AutoEase can be a beneficial process, but it is not going to make or break. If all the other steps are not executed perfectly, just doing an AutoEase is not going to guarantee you have a perfect bread, but it is a good, valuable tool. Mixing by hand, and I will keep throughout the morning, and as other guys are talking, I'll keep mixing this, and I encourage you guys all to come up and I can move it over, and you'll see how the dough goes from, as it was shaggy, it's a little bit smoother now. The sun is definitely adding another factor in here, but it'll come together and get more and more, and it'll get smooth, very, very supple. So if you're using machine, traditionally you'll see kind of 3 different types of mixes. You're going to have a short mix, an improved mix, and an intensive mix. I'm not going to go too far in depth right now. If you want more on those types of mixes, please stop by, talk to me, we can go further in depth. The different types of mix pretty well correlates with the type of end dough you are working with, whether you have a lean dough, a rustic dough, an enriched dough, or an embellished dough. So yeah, just kind of think short, improved, or intensive mix. Those are your 3 if you're using machine. Another term you'll see out with mixing is something called a stretch and fold or a punch and fold. When I was a kid, it was always, you just degas it. So you know, my parents would let me kind of punch the dough per se. Stretching and folding, the benefit of that is a way to stretch out the gluten strands, overlap them. You're also redistributing the food, the sugars that are within that flour, so the wild yeast, the natural bacteria, or if you are also using commercial yeast, kind of have some new food to smorgasbord on, to eat. So stretching and folding is a way to increase the gluten, the strength, to realign it, but also to redistribute the yeast throughout the dough. And then last is fermentation. That kind of ties in with Jonathan, who's speaking next. But if you want to, a way you can kind of change the end product with your mixing is your fermentation. So it's just time and temperature. When you are going to mix, there's a term also that you'll see thrown around in there is called the final dough temperature. Most yeast, wild and commercial, is going to be happiest from a 73 to 78 degree Fahrenheit kind of window temperature. So with that, with the fermentation, the slower you ferment your bread, you're going to elicit different flavor profiles out of that wheat versus if you do a higher temperature and a shorter fermentation time. So you can use a lot of different tools that are really nothing you have to pay for. It's just time and temperature and getting creative with that to change the end flavor profile and kind of the structure of your bread. I hope this kind of brief overview of mixing gave you some enlightenment or idea of how it's done. If you want more in depth of just the mixing process or how I do things, please stop by. Like I said, I'll keep mixing this and you'll be able to see how it visually changes, but also to come up and touch it. I'll bake this afternoon. I don't care if 10 or 1,000 people touch it. I'll still bake it at home and see how it turns out. But thank you very much for your time, for being out here. Like I said, if you have any questions, please pull me aside and we can talk further. Have a look here. There's a... All right. When I mix at home, I usually use this large mixing bowl that I have here. I just do it in here. It keeps it clean. But when there's a entertaining and fun way to mix dough, some people refer to it as the old French way, and I'll do that here. It's a little noisy, but it's just another way of mixing by hand that you can do. This is what we've been waiting for. Slap and fold. Yeah.
see the dough changing in consistency.
So even with that short amount of time, it definitely smooths it out a little bit. It's still, the gluten is still really weak, so it's tearing a little bit, but you can see even just with that little bit of slap and fold, or kind of the old French way of doing it, it's a way to start aligning that gluten, building that structure in the dough. It's a fun way to mix, but when I have 3 kids and doing this at 3 o'clock in the morning, I can't do it that way. So that's why I use a mixing bowl, so I keep the wife and the kids happy with a quiet house. But it's a fun, entertaining way. You do it a lot, it's kind of a good workout. You can really get going, especially if you have a large total amount of dough to do.